She just wanted a piece of bread, pregnant, exhausted, invisible, in the pouring rain, standing in front of a fancy restaurant. She gathered the little courage she had left to ask a stranger, "Do you have anything left over?" But that man, he wasn't just anyone. He was a lonely millionaire with a painful past and a heart that had long shut itself off from the world. He could have turned away, but in that moment, he did something no one else had done. He saw her. What happened next? You won't believe. An unlikely meeting, a secret buried for decades, a switched identity, a kidnapping, and a love that not even lies could destroy. This story will move you from start to finish. And if you believe true love can survive even the darkest storms, subscribe to the channel now and join us for this journey of pain, hope, and new beginnings. Because here, every story is a reunion with what makes us human. It was a night like so many others in New York, cold, damp, with a sharp wind slicing through the corners of buildings, as if the city itself wanted to push away anyone who didn't belong. Cars rushed down brightly lit avenues, storefronts flashed with vibrant colors, and people walked quickly, not bothering to look around. The most fragile among them became invisible. Claire, her 9-month belly weighing down her thin frame, curled up beneath a faded awning near the side entrance of a luxury restaurant. Her feet were wet, her tattered coat clung to her skin, and her hair stuck to her face, but none of that stopped her eyes from scanning the people leaving the restaurant, laughing after their meals. She wasn't begging. She just wanted to know if anything was left. A piece of bread, some rice, anything, and then fate took a turn. He stepped out of the restaurant alone, tall, well-dressed, with a face that held a quiet and weary kind of beauty. Nathan Crawford was known among the elite as one of the city's most successful businessmen, a man who had built his fortune with strategy and precision. But that night, there was something different in his eyes. He stopped. Claire hesitated. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper, barely pushing past the shame. "Excuse me, did you happen to have any leftovers?" His gaze lowered slowly, taking in the scene. There was no pity in his expression, no disgust, just surprise, and then a silence so deep it seemed to drown out the noise of the city for a moment. People around frowned. A waiter rushed forward to intervene, but before he could say anything, Nathan raised a hand. "It's all right," he said firmly. "She's with me." Claire blinked, confused. Her eyes widened even more when he opened the door and gently led her inside the restaurant. The lights were warm inside, the air thick with the scent of truffle and wine, and all the eyes turned toward them, sharp like blades. Claire hunched her shoulders, but Nathan walked beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He asked for a new table, ordered hot food, and when she tried to refuse, he simply said, "Eat, we'll talk after." And so she did. The first spoonful of soup trembled in her hand, but as it slid down her throat, it felt like it was melting a part of the cold that had lived inside her for so long. Nathan watched in silence, arms resting on the table, as if he were trying to understand her, not out of curiosity, but with the kind of look someone gives when they've known pain too. "What's your name?" he asked, once her plate was nearly empty. "Claire, and I'm expecting a girl. Not long now. Do you have a place to stay?" She hesitated. Her fingers traced the edge of her plate, as if the words might slip away. "Sometimes at shelters, sometimes on the street. This city, it's not kind to those who carry too much." Nathan nodded slowly, then looked out the window. The rain was falling harder. For a moment he seemed caught in a memory, something distant reflected in his eyes. "I lost someone a long time ago," he said, though she hadn't asked. "Since then I've gotten used to keeping quiet. But tonight, seeing you out there with that child coming, something shook me." Claire lowered her eyes. She didn't know what to say. She was too tired to tell if any of this was real, or just some cruel dream brought on by hunger. But then he continued, "Come with me, just for tonight. I have a guest room. It's warm, safe, you need rest. And so does your baby." Her eyes widened, startled. Her fork dropped onto the plate, and for several long seconds, all she could do was stare at him. No one had ever offered her anything, ever, and now, a man who had the whole world at his feet was reaching out a hand to her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Nathan leaned in slightly, his eyes steady on hers. "Because I once needed someone too, and no one came." Claire took a deep breath. Her heart was racing. Her whole life she had learned not to trust, but for some reason she couldn't explain. She stood up, and that night, as the two of them walked together through the rain-soaked streets of New York, there was something in the air that neither the cold nor the rain could wash away. A new story had begun, but Claire had no idea just how much was still waiting to unfold. The rain was light as the car moved through the city streets. Toward the Upper East Side, Claire sat in the back, seat next to Nathan, staring out the window in silence. The reflected lights on the glass looked blurred, as if the world outside was being rewritten, line by line. Her hands rested on her belly, feeling the soft movements of her daughter, as if the baby, too, was trying to make sense of what was happening. Nathan didn't talk much. There was a calmness about him that didn't come from silence alone, but from the kind of presence that made space for others. The kind of quiet that didn't intimidate, but comforted. When the car stopped in front of the large house with its classical facade, Claire's heart skipped a beat. Towering columns, stone steps, glowing windows from within. It all looked like something out of a movie, a world she had never dreamed she could enter. Her instincts told her to hesitate. "We can turn back if you'd prefer," Nathan said, opening the door and turning to her. "But if you accept, this is your home, for as long as you need it." Claire stepped out slowly. The driver handed her a small, worn-out backpack. It was everything she had, everything. The warmth of the house wrapped around her. The moment she crossed the threshold, like an unexpected embrace. The polished wooden floor, the scent of fresh flowers in elegant vases, the crackling fire in the fireplace, everything radiated comfort. A world she never thought she'd touch. "I've prepared a room for you upstairs," he said. "There's a private bathroom, clean clothes, blankets, and a crib. I'm not sure it's in the right place, but I thought maybe." She froze. Her eyes locked onto his. "A crib?" Nathan gave a faint, almost shy smile. "I had it set up this afternoon. Something told me that, well, you might need it." Claire brought a hand to her mouth. The emotion hit her like a wave, sudden and warm. It was so rare for anyone to think of her, to plan something for her. And he had done that without even knowing her. "You don't have to cry," he said softly. "I just want you to feel safe." She climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt like it was peeling away a layer of the armor she had built over the years. When she opened the door to the bedroom, she saw it was more than just a space. It felt like a home, even if just for a while. Clothes were neatly folded on the bed. The sheets were soft and smelled of lavender. In the corner, the white crib seemed to glow under the lamp's light. Claire stepped closer, running her fingers across the wood. She had almost forgotten what it was like to picture the future with tenderness. That night, after a warm bath, she put on one of the pajamas she found in the drawer. She looked at herself in the mirror. The dark circles were still there, the exhaustion still heavy, but something had changed. Dignity, for the first time in a long while. She saw herself as a human being, not a burden. Nathan knocked lightly on the half-open door. "Everything okay in there?" She nodded. "It's more than okay. I'm glad. I was thinking, tomorrow morning, if you're up for it, we could go for a checkup, just to make sure everything's all right with the baby. I have a doctor I trust, only if you're comfortable with that." Her first instinct was to say no. Pride still lived inside her, whispering, but something inside her softened. "Thank you, truly. Good night, Claire."
"Good night, Nathan."
He walked away and she gently closed the door. She leaned her forehead against the wood and took a deep breath. And for the first time in years, she lay down on a warm bed without fear of being kicked out, without newspapers or plastic bags as blankets. Hope, yes, she was already calling her that, stirred softly in her belly, as if she too was grateful for the warmth. But Claire knew. Nothing was guaranteed. Life didn't hand out miracles without asking something in return. Still, she fell asleep with a faint smile on her lips. What she didn't know was that the real shock would come days later. And it wouldn't be about fear or pain. It would be something that would tie her story to Nathan's in a way neither of them could have imagined. 2 days had passed, and Claire still found it hard to believe everything was real. The white curtains swayed gently in the morning breeze. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, and the silence no longer echoed abandonment. It felt like peace. Every morning, she would wake up and adjust the tiny bedding inside the crib by her bed. Even though the baby hadn't arrived yet, it was like she was preparing a nest made of hope. Nathan remained kind and respectful. He never overstepped, but he always showed up with a tray of breakfast or a sincere question about how she was feeling. That house, so imposing and cold on the outside, had slowly begun to feel warm. But that morning, everything was about to change. While sipping coffee at the dining table, Claire suddenly felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. Quick but intense. Then another. She tried to hide her discomfort, but Nathan noticed right away. "Are you in pain?" he asked, immediately setting his cup down. She hesitated, trying to breathe through it. "Maybe contractions, but I think it's still early. We're going to the hospital." Right now, before she could object, he was already calling the driver and grabbing the small bag she had packed. In the car, Claire clutched the seat while Nathan held her hand tightly. The ride to the private hospital where he had connections was short, but in her mind, she traveled through 1,000 paths of uncertainty. What if it wasn't time yet? What if something was wrong? At the hospital, the doctors attended to her immediately, taking her into an exam room. Nathan waited outside, restless, until a nurse called him in with a small, knowing smile. "She's all right. The contractions are still early, but during the scan, we found something curious, and we thought you might want to see." Perplexed, he entered the room. Claire sat up on the exam bed, a blanket covering her belly. On the monitor, the image of the developing baby floated gently in soft shades of gray. But what caught his attention was a faint mark right near the base of the baby's neck. "This here," the doctor pointed out, "it's a birthmark, unusual but clearly visible, shaped like a star." Nathan's blood ran cold. "A star?" he repeated, barely finding his voice. Claire slowly turned to look at him, sensing something shift in his expression. Is there something wrong?" Nathan swallowed hard. His face had gone pale. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his thoughts. "My sister. She had a mark like that, identical, in the exact same spot." "Your sister?" Claire frowned. "She was kidnapped when she was 2. We never found her. It was a big case, over 20 years ago. The only real clue we had was that mark. A perfect star right there." Silence felt like a storm ready to break. "You think?" "I don't know," he said, exhaling. "But, Claire, do you know anything about your biological parents?" She paused. Her face grew pale. "I was raised by a man, a gardener. He always said my mother died during childbirth. I never saw a birth certificate, never knew any family. He treated me like a daughter, but I don't really know if he was my father." Nathan leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of the impossible connection unfolding before them. Every piece seemed to move in slow motion. The baby's face on the screen, the mark, his past, hers. "Have you ever done a DNA test?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "Never. Why?" "Because, Claire, it's possible that you're my missing sister." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Claire brought her hand to her mouth, a wave of heat flooding her chest. The image of her daughter still glowed on the screen, as if silently watching the moment from within her womb. Nathan stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. There was no certainty, but something deep and ancient echoed between them. Something that couldn't be ignored. "I need to know," he said, "and I think you do too." Claire nodded, unable to speak. Tears began rolling silently down her cheeks. That day, they left the hospital not only carrying the promise of a new life about to begin, but also the weight of a mystery between them, an invisible thread buried in time, on the verge of being revealed. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Tests, phone calls, trips back and forth to specialized clinics, the Crawford family lawyers being brought in, labs mobilized. Nathan's DNA was collected discreetly, so was Claire's. And finally, the baby's still in the womb, was retrieved with the utmost care. Claire could barely sleep. The contractions had spaced out, but her heart felt like it was beating out of rhythm. A new world was unfolding before her, and at the same time a terrifying abyss. If she really was Nathan's sister, everything would change, everything. Nathan was restless too. For the first time in years, he found himself replaying old memories. A lonely childhood, pictures of his sister hanging in the mansion's hallways, his adoptive parents devastated by her disappearance. The star-shaped birthmark had been a clue, but confirmation had to be precise. 2 days later, the results arrived. Claire held the envelope in trembling hands. They sat in the reading room, sunlight pouring through the window in golden streaks. The silence felt thick. Nathan sat across from her, on the edge of the armchair, elbows resting on his knees as if bracing for impact before even knowing what was inside. She read every line twice, then slowly looked up. "We're not siblings," she whispered. "Not even related." Nathan didn't respond right away. He simply closed his eyes and let the air leave his chest. "Are you sure?" "The test says you're adopted by the Crawfords. And I'm Martin Hayes' daughter, the gardener." Nathan's eyebrows lifted, surprised. "Martin? He had an affair with your adoptive mother, and from that I was born. But he never told anyone. He raised me in secret in another town, hidden from the world." Nathan ran his hands through his hair, trying to process it. The revelation not only ruled out any biological connection to the baby, it also unraveled part of his own identity. "So you're the daughter of the woman who raised me. But we don't share any blood, and I'm not truly a Crawford." Claire nodded gently. The two of them sat there for a moment, trying to absorb the strange reality between them. He stood up and walked to the window, gazing out over the city below. "For years I thought my life was built on solid ground. Business, inheritance, reputation. But the truth is, it was all built on a story that wasn't really mine. I've always been a guest in that family." Claire stayed quiet. She could feel his pain, the confusion, like it was her own. She stepped closer, slowly, until she was just a few feet away. "Nathan, you gave me shelter when no one even looked at me. When everyone saw a burden, you treated me like someone still worthy of love. That has nothing to do with DNA." He turned to face her. His eyes were glassy but steady. "I know, and maybe that's exactly why I feel this way. Because now that I know we're not siblings, that nothing stands between us, I can't stop thinking about you, about us." Claire froze. Her heart skipped a beat. A wave of heat rose in her chest. It felt like all of it, the pain, the missteps, the fear, had led to this moment. But she didn't know what to say. It was still too much, still too soon. Nathan sensed the silence and stepped back. "I'm sorry. I don't want to pressure you. I just needed you to know that I don't see you as someone I need to protect anymore. I see you as someone I want to walk beside." Claire took a deep breath. She felt hope move gently inside her, as if reacting to the stillness, this pause between past and future. I need time," she said honestly, "to understand what I'm feeling. To separate gratitude from love and fear from desire." He nodded. "I'll give you all the time you need." She smiled softly. That afternoon there was no kiss, no promise, but there was something stronger, space, respect, and a seed planted in the fertile soil of truth. What would come next was still a mystery, but something new had already begun to grow between them, something no bloodline could ever define. The night arrived wrapped in silence, as if the whole city were holding its breath. The dark sky hid the stars, but inside the Crawford mansion, every second felt like an eternity in motion. Claire woke with a sharp pain that made her sit up in a rush. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. The contractions were back, this time rhythmic, intense. She tried to stand on her own, but stumbled. Before she could call for help, the door opened. Nathan stepped in, as if he had sensed something was wrong. "Are you okay? I think it's time." His eyes widened for a second. Without saying another word, he grabbed his coat, helped Claire carefully, and called the driver. In minutes, they were on their way to the hospital, the car gliding through New York's empty streets. Claire breathed through the pain, gripping Nathan's hand like it was the only safe place she had left in the world. At the hospital, the team was ready. Nathan handled everything: paperwork, room, doctors. Claire was taken to the delivery room, and even in the midst of pain, she looked around with silent gratitude. She wasn't alone. For the first time, she wasn't alone. Hours later, through a cry that pierced the quiet with purity, a new life was born. "It's a girl," the doctor announced softly. "Healthy, strong." Claire wept. The tears flowed down her cheeks as if they were washing away years of abandonment, fear and pain. When they placed the baby in her arms, she trembled. That tiny life, eyes closed and skin so soft, was the reason she had endured, survived, waited. Nathan came in moments later, unsure if he should step closer, but Claire called to him with her eyes. As he approached the bed, she extended the baby toward him, her hands still fragile but steady. "Would you like to hold her?" Nathan hesitated for just a moment. Then he took the baby gently into his arms, like he was being handed a secret from the universe. Her crying stopped the second she felt his warmth. Her eyes still shut, but the calm was complete. "Have you chosen a name?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Claire nodded. "Hope." Nathan looked at her, surprised. A soft, genuine smile touched his lips. "Hope. She represents all of it," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything I thought I'd never have. A new beginning, a chance, a family." He looked down at the baby with tenderness. "It's perfect." From that moment on, the rhythm of their days changed. Hope slept peacefully in Claire's arms, nursed with strength and woke with gentle little sounds. The house filled with new life, the baby's cries, Claire's quiet laughter, Nathan's careful footsteps down the hallway. He was more involved than he ever imagined he'd be. He got up at night to warm bottles, learned to change diapers with cautious hands, and spent hours rocking Hope in the chair on the balcony, telling her made-up stories in the dark. Claire watched it all silently, amazed. The bond between them grew each day, no longer rooted in gratitude or surprise, but in time, in care, in trust. One evening, while the three of them sat in the living room, Hope asleep between them, Claire looked at Nathan and said, "Did you know she recognizes you? When you're near, her whole expression changes." Nathan smiled, moved. "I love her like she's mine." Claire nodded. "She feels that. And so do I." A silence filled the room, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was charged with something about to shift. Claire looked at him, eyes glistening. "Thank you for not leaving me that night, for seeing me when no one else did." Nathan leaned in slightly, his heart racing. "You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. The feeling of being needed." The words hung in the air, like a confession without a label. Time seemed to slow down, but before either of them could move, Hope stirred in Claire's arms and let out a soft cry. The moment broke, but what remained was stronger than a kiss. It was the quiet certainty that something was growing between them, and no one knew how far it could go. Winter had finally given way to a shy spring, and with it the days began to feel lighter. The sun poured more generously through the mansion's windows, warming corners that had once been cold and quiet. But no change outside could compare to what was quietly growing between Claire and Nathan, day by day, in glances, in gestures, in silence. Hope was now 2 months old. She was peaceful, smiley, and had developed the habit of falling, asleep best when her cheek rested on Nathan's chest. Claire watched them with a mix of wonder and something deeper, a dim warmth that came not just from admiring a good man, but from discovering feelings she could no longer pretend didn't exist. They didn't speak about what they felt. It was as if they were both afraid that putting it into words would break the spell, yet they grew closer with each passing day. Claire now had lunch with Nathan regularly, sometimes in the garden, other times sitting on the living room floor, laughing between bottles and burp cloths. At night, they watched old movies together, Hope sleeping between them like a little bridge of innocence, between two hearts marked by pain. But one evening that bridge faded. Hope was asleep in her crib. Claire sat on the balcony wrapped in a light blanket, staring at the city lights in the distance. Her hair was tied back loosely, her eyes tired but soft. Nathan appeared with 2 mugs of tea and sat beside her. "It's calmer now," he said, handing her the cup. She nodded. "Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I'm back on the street, It takes time for the body to believe the pain is gone. Nathan watched her for a moment, then turned his gaze toward the horizon. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Claire." She smiled, not bitterly but softly. "I just survived. You chose to see me. That's rarer than courage." A silence fell between them, heavier this time, but it was Nathan who broke it. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you feel like you could start over after everything with someone?" Claire took a moment. Her heart raced. The mug in her hand suddenly felt warmer. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said honestly, "but I know that if it were with you, I wouldn't be afraid." Their eyes met, and in that instant something cracked open inside both of them. Not pain, just the final wall giving way. Nathan moved closer, slowly, like someone crossing a minefield. Claire didn't pull away. Her eyes were steady. There was no hesitation, only a slight tremble in the corner of her lips, as if they'd been waiting for this moment. The kiss was gentle, not rushed, not desperate. It was a recognition, a gesture that said everything words couldn't. When they pulled apart, they both smiled, shy, almost like teenagers discovering love for the first time. Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd love again. I never thought I still knew how." They stayed there for a long time in silence. Hope slept peacefully in the room nearby. The city lay still, unaware of the quiet miracle blooming on that balcony. From that day on, everything shifted, subtly but surely. Touches lingered a bit longer, hugs felt warmer. Nathan began calling Claire "my love" without even noticing, and she would run her fingers through his hair like someone who knew every part of him, every scar, every sigh. They didn't announce anything, no grand declarations, no plans for the future. They simply lived each day as if planting roots, one by one. Hope continued to grow healthy, surrounded by love. Claire started taking small online courses in the evenings. Nathan adjusted his work schedule to be more present. The house, once cold and sterile, now smelled of cake and echoed with laughter. But amid the calm, something stirred. Anonymous letters began to arrive. Cruel comments on social media. Photographs of Claire, clearly taken without her knowing. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just the usual malice of the internet. But someone was watching. Someone was digging. And something big was about to be exposed. Unaware, Claire and Nathan were on the verge of facing the greatest test of trust they'd ever known. The first signs came like whispers, tiny cracks in what had once felt like a flawless surface. A snide comment from a socialite at a charity event. A cryptic message sent to Nathan's social media. "Do you really know the woman you're sleeping with?" Nathan, used to corporate drama and jealous gossip, brushed it off. But Claire noticed the shift in his eyes. It was subtle but real, a flicker of doubt, of hesitation, as if something inside him had started to question the story. It all shattered one gray afternoon. Nathan received a white envelope with no return address. Inside was a dossier, photos, records, a detailed account of Claire's life, but not the version she had told him. According to the documents, Claire had never spent long on the streets. She'd lived in stable shelters, even volunteered at a community project, and had a permanent address until just a few months before meeting Nathan. But more than that, the file included text exchanges with a man, Michael Whitman, a name Nathan had never heard. And among the documents was a birth certificate, with his name listed as the father, Hope. Nathan's world tilted. He didn't yell. He didn't storm into the room in rage. Instead, he waited. He thought, and after hours of silence, he walked into the bedroom, where Claire was nursing Hope. Her eyes lit up, as they always did when she saw him, but his didn't smile back. "We need to talk," he said, in a tone she had never heard from him before. Claire felt the ground vanish beneath her. Hope, unaware of the tension, nursed peacefully. Nathan handed her the papers without a word. Claire looked, read, and said nothing. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. She took a breath and replied with the same honesty she had always tried to live by. "Yes, but not how it looks." Nathan stepped back, frustration clouding his face. "Then explain. Why did you lie? Why did you let me believe the father of your child abandoned you?" "Because he didn't know I was pregnant. And when I found out, it was already too late. I was scared, Nathan. Scared of being judged, rejected, humiliated. Scared you'd walk away, like everyone else always has. He looked at her, pain in his eyes. "You didn't trust me." "I didn't trust anyone," Claire said, voice trembling. "But that changed. You changed me." But by the time I realized that, I was already buried in the lie. And I didn't know how to come clean. Nathan looked at Hope, the baby he'd cradled so many nights, whose first smiles he had witnessed, whom he held like his own, and now he didn't know what had been real and what had been carefully withheld. "I need time," he said softly. "I need to figure out if what we had was love or manipulation." Claire reached for his arm, but he stepped back. "Please, let me explain everything." "Not now." The next day, Claire was moved to a modest apartment in Brooklyn. Nathan had arranged it all: basic furniture, a crib, a small sum of money to get by. But the rest, she'd have to earn. 3 months, he said before leaving. "Live with what you have, work, rebuild, and then I'll come back. I'll see with my own eyes if you're really who you say you are." Claire agreed. Not because she wanted to, but because he deserved the truth. Not just in words, but in action. That night, alone with Hope in a small, cold apartment, Claire cried. Not for the comfort she had lost, but because, for the first time, she had seen doubt in his eyes, a loss of faith. She would have to start over again, but now, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting to prove that real love can also be born from the shadows of a lie. And as she organized her new life, she didn't know that far away. On the other side of the country, a shadow from her past was already on its way. A shadow that wore her face, but not her heart. Life in Brooklyn had a bitter, lonely taste. The apartment where Claire now lived was small, old, with a damp smell clinging to the walls and a heater that made more noise than heat. But it was safe, and it was hers. For the first time in a long while, she had to start over without anyone's protection. Only the truth and hope in her arms. The baby struggled to adjust in the beginning. She cried more at night, woke up restless. Claire tried to keep a routine, to stay calm. But there was a silence inside her that hurt more than any cold. Nathan's absence was a living void. Not because of comfort or luxury, but because of the way he looked at her. His gentle touch, the certainty of being loved. She couldn't blame him. She had lied, hidden the truth. Out of fear, yes, but still, she had broken the trust of someone who had never once judged her. And now, she had to prove she was more than the mistakes of her past. The day after the move, Claire went job hunting. No diploma, no formal experience, no references, just courage. And the need to provide for her daughter with dignity. After knocking on 10 doors, she finally landed a position as a server in a small cafe. The pay was minimum wage, but it was enough for rice, milk, and diapers. In those first few days, time seemed to vanish. She woke at 5, got Hope ready, left her with an elderly neighbor from the building next door, caught the subway, wiped tables, smiled at strangers. At night, she returned home exhausted but standing. 2 weeks passed, then 3, a month. Across town, Nathan was trying to move on too, but her absence echoed through every corner of the mansion. The empty crib, the toys Claire had picked out, the faint scent of the chamomile, tea she always drank at night. It all screamed her name. He kept tabs from a distance. He asked someone to quietly check in on her, not out of control, but out of care. He knew where she worked, what she earned, that she caught the 6:17 a.m. subway and came back at 8:05 p.m., that Hope was healthy, that Claire refused help from neighbors and never complained. But that wasn't what he needed to know. Nathan needed more than resilience. He wanted truth. He needed to see if the love they had could survive outside the bubble, outside the mansion. And Claire was proving it could. Still, doubt gnawed at him. There was something in Claire he couldn't fully read, a layer still hidden. A part of her he didn't know if it was pain or strategy. Until one rainy Sunday he went to the cafe. Claire was working, apron stained with coffee, hair tied back in a loose knot. Even so, she looked beautiful, tired but grounded. She turned and saw him. Her heart jumped. For a second, they both froze. Her hands trembled. His eyes searched her face. For guilt, for longing, for truth. She stepped closer, unsure of what to say. "Hi," she whispered. "You look beautiful," he replied. She swallowed hard. "I thought you weren't coming back." "I needed to see it for myself." Claire looked into his eyes. "And now that you have?" Nathan hesitated, rubbed the back of his neck, breathed in deep. "I still don't know what I feel. I'm still trying to figure out what was real. But seeing you here on your feet, fighting, that says a lot." She lowered her eyes, holding back emotion. "I never meant to lie to you. I just got lost trying to hold on to something good." Nathan nodded slowly. 3 months. That was the deal. "We're almost there. Then we'll talk." And he left. No kiss, no promises. Claire stood there, empty coffee cup in her hand, trying not to cry. But something in her had changed. She was steadier now, more grounded. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined her. Outside, as Nathan stepped into his car, he didn't notice the figure watching him from across the street. A cold stare, identical to Claire's, but with very different intentions. The twin sister had arrived. She appeared like a reflection, a perfect echo of Claire, but with a far more polished, calculating presence. Samantha. She wore a tailored coat, leather boots, and her wavy hair fell perfectly over her shoulders in a rehearsed kind of elegance. Her eyes, although identical to Claire's, didn't carry the same sorrow, only ambition and a trace of irony. Samantha watched Claire from a distance for days, sitting at nearby cafes, tracking her schedule, eavesdropping on conversations, not out of longing or concern, but because she had a plan, and Claire was the centerpiece. The two had grown up apart. Samantha had been put up for adoption as a baby. She'd had a privileged childhood in a wealthy California town, raised by a cold but affluent family. At 18, she discovered by accident that she had a twin sister, and since then, she'd spent years quietly following Claire's life from afar. But recently, after reading an article online about a reclusive millionaire spotted in a modest cafe with a young mother, her passive curiosity turned into something sharper. She wanted what Claire had. That afternoon, as Claire returned from work exhausted, with Hope sleeping in the stroller, she was startled to find a woman standing at the entrance of her building. "You must be Claire." Claire's eyes widened. It was like staring into a mirror. Same frame, same features, same voice, only with a firmer, sharper tone. "Who are you?" "Samantha, your twin sister." Claire froze. The silence that followed was broken only by Hope's sleepy grumble. Claire stared at the woman, trying to decide if this was real or just another hallucination brought on by exhaustion. "Is this some kind of joke?" she whispered. "No, I know everything about you, Claire. I know about Hope, about Nathan, about what you've hidden and what you've lost." Claire gripped the stroller tighter, her eyes filled with alarm. "What do you want?" Samantha smiled, unhurried. "Maybe to trade places, just for a little while." Claire frowned. "You're insane. Or maybe I'm your only shot. Look at yourself. Working 14-hour shifts, living in this shoebox, constantly afraid of losing everything. Meanwhile, he, the lovesick millionaire, is testing you, judging whether or not you're worthy." Claire didn't reply. Anger and confusion swirled in her eyes, but Samantha knew exactly how to hit the sore spots. "I could go back to the life you lost, step into the mansion, make him fall in love again, show him that you've changed, that you deserve to be heard." Claire's eyes widened. "You want me to let you pretend to be me?" "Exactly. I go in, win him back, and when the time is right, you show up. With your daughter, the perfect reunion." Claire stepped back, stunned. "This is madness. Or it's your only chance." In the days that followed, Claire wrestled with the idea. She tried to ignore it, focusing on work. But it echoed in her head. What if this was really a way to prove to Nathan, without pressure, how much she had changed? From a distance, quietly, a week later, she said yes. They built a plan. Claire coached Samantha what to say, how to move, what to avoid. It was risky, but Samantha was convincing. She had a gift for deception, and Nathan, emotionally drained and still confused, was more vulnerable than ever. Within days, Samantha, posing as Claire, was back in the mansion. And Nathan believed her. He believed the sweetness in her eyes, the warmth of her touch, the words that felt just real enough. But what Claire didn't know was that Samantha had no intention of giving any of it back. She wanted Nathan for herself. She wanted the fortune, the life, the name, all of it. And more than that, she wasn't acting alone. Beatrice Monroe, a former business rival of Nathan's, obsessed with his downfall and anything that could hurt him, was behind the curtain. She funded Samantha, fed her information, pulled the strings of the entire performance. And when Beatrice realized Claire was still a threat, she decided to remove her from the game, permanently. Inside the Crawford mansion, Samantha moved with precision. She had mastered the art of mimicking Claire perfectly. The way she tied her hair, her shy smile, even the subtle tone of her voice. To Nathan, it was as if Claire had returned, more confident, more composed, as though their time apart had helped her grow. And in a way it had, just not in the way he imagined. Samantha seduced Nathan with a calculated blend of vulnerability and charm. She knew exactly what to say, when to pull back, how to smile with just enough mystery. In no time, their relationship regained its intimacy. Beatrice watched from afar, pleased. For her, it wasn't about love. It was war. She wanted to see Nathan ruined, and Samantha was her most effective weapon. Elsewhere in Brooklyn, Claire cared for Hope, unaware that the limits of the plan had already been crossed. She had imagined that Samantha would only pretend to be her long enough to earn back Nathan's trust, but she never expected her sister to actually fall for him or to sleep with him. But Samantha had gone even further. She was digging through documents, confidential emails, secrets of the company, and sending them all to Beatrice, who was preparing a financial blow that could destroy Nathan's reputation. Samantha's heart swung between the thrill of control and a growing shadow of guilt. But every time she saw Nathan sleeping beside her, peaceful and trusting, something inside her hardened. Claire had always had everything. For once, Samantha wanted to be the one who was chosen. Meanwhile, Claire sensed something was wrong. Samantha's updates had stopped. The agreement they once controlled together was slipping through her fingers. And one restless night, Claire made a decision. She would go to the mansion, not to reclaim her place, but to see for herself what was really happening. She slipped through the garden shadows, through the living room window. She saw the unthinkable, Samantha, curled on the couch with Nathan laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. The same expression Claire knew so well. The same tenderness, the same intimacy. Her heart sank. She left without being seen, her chest burning. This wasn't about helping anymore. Samantha was living her life, as if it were hers. The next day, Claire tried calling. She sent messages, nothing. Across town, Beatrice clasped Samantha's hands. It's time to remove her. For good. Samantha hesitated, but Beatrice didn't flinch. Either she disappears, or everything falls apart. That afternoon, Claire received a call from an unknown number. A soft, polite female voice introduced herself as a representative of a wellness center. She explained that Claire had been selected for a free retreat for single mothers, meals, therapy, accommodations, all sponsored by a charitable foundation. Claire, worn out and vulnerable, saw a small window of relief. It's a 3-day stay, no cost at all, the voice said. Just bring the essentials for you and your baby. We'll send a car. Claire hesitated. Her instincts tingled, but still, she agreed. Hours later, a dark car arrived to pick her up. Hope slept in her arms. Claire, with a backpack slung over her shoulder, got into the back seat. The driver said nothing. The route taken was not the one promised. And by the time Claire realized it, it was too late. She was taken to an isolated house and locked in a room with barred windows and damp walls. Hope was still with her, and that alone kept her grounded. Across the city, Samantha knew. And though she pretended to sleep soundly in Nathan's arms, guilt was already eating away at her insides. She had crossed a line she wasn't sure she could ever undo. Beatrice, on the other hand, smiled at a screen full of financial data. Nathan trusted her. The company was vulnerable. The plan was near completion. But what neither of them knew was that Claire had left something behind. Something that could change everything. The room where Claire was being held was damp, dimly lit, and thick with the musty scent of isolation. The peeling walls seemed to absorb every silent scream she didn't dare release. Hope slept in her arms, unaware of the fear that loomed around them. Claire didn't know exactly who was behind the abduction, but deep down she did, and it hurt to admit it. Samantha had crossed the line. What had begun as an agreement had become betrayal. But Claire wouldn't lose hope, not this time. Before being taken, she had hidden a letter inside one of Nathan's favorite books in the library, where she used to read on quiet spring nights. The letter said everything. The truth about Samantha, about the switch, about the plan, and about Beatrice. It was her last resort, a silent cry for when no one else would listen. Back at the Crawford mansion, the tension was rising. Samantha grew increasingly restless. Guilt was creeping in like rust under her skin. Nathan noticed the changes, longer silences, distant looks, little mistakes, things Claire would never forget. One night, alone in his study, he pulled one of the old books from the shelf and the letter fell to the floor. His hands trembled as he opened it. He read every line, and the impact hit like a punch to the chest. Suddenly, the pieces all clicked into place. The swap, the lies, the silence, and above all, Claire's disappearance. He sprang to his feet and rushed out of the house, ignoring Samantha's questions. He called his personal security team, mobilized contacts, launched a private investigation, and within 24 hours, using a GPS, signal still active in the car that had picked up Claire, he found the location. It was a rural property, isolated, registered under one of Beatrice Monroe's shell companies. When the police broke down the door, Claire was curled in a corner, clutching Hope tightly to her chest. Her eyes met Nathan's, and for a second, time stopped. He rushed to her. "I'm here. You're safe. It's over now." She broke down in tears, and Hope, as if recognizing his voice, stretched her little arms toward him. Nathan took her, a lump in his throat. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to Claire. She nodded, weak but steady. Hours later, safe and recovering, Claire gave her full statement to the authorities. She told everything: the switch with Samantha, the manipulation, Beatrice's plan, the stolen documents, the access to confidential systems, every detail. Samantha was found that same day. Surprisingly, she didn't run. She was sitting on the mansion's front porch when the police arrived. And at that moment, seeing Claire alive, held in Nathan's arms, something inside her shattered. "I was going to give it all back," she said as they handcuffed her. "But I fell in love, and by the time I realized it, I'd already gone too far." Claire didn't respond. She simply looked into her sister's eyes and said, "What you destroyed wasn't just my life. It was your own." Beatrice, on the other hand, tried to deny everything. She denied involvement, denied knowing Samantha, denied the plan. But she didn't count on the recording. During her captivity, Claire had hidden her phone beneath the blanket and activated the voice recorder. Beatrice had visited the house twice, and on one of those visits, she had confessed everything, with the arrogance of someone who thinks they'll never be caught. The recording was handed over to the police. The evidence was irrefutable. Beatrice Monroe was arrested on charges of kidnapping, extortion, privacy violations, and corporate conspiracy. Samantha, despite her remorse, would also face justice, now charged with fraud and identity theft. But before being taken away, she asked to speak with Claire. Nathan hesitated, but Claire agreed. "I didn't know how to handle the emptiness," Samantha sobbed. "I thought if I became you, I'd finally be loved. But I learned the hard way that love can't be stolen." Claire didn't say much. She simply took her sister's hand and whispered, "It's not too late to change," and she let her go. The next day, Nathan brought Claire and Hope back home. But everything felt different. The wounds still ached. The heart still trembled. Yet in the midst of the wreckage, something new was beginning to grow. Nathan watched as Claire tucked Hope into her crib. "I don't know if I deserve you," he said softly. Claire turned to face him. "Love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing." He stepped closer, gently cupping her face. "Then will you choose to stay?" She smiled, eyes glistening, but before she could answer, Hope stirred and began to cry. They looked at each other, smiling through the exhaustion, and they both knew, despite everything they had been through, They were ready to begin again. 6 months had passed. Autumn had painted New York in shades of gold and burnt orange. Leaves danced along the sidewalks, and the crisp air carried a quiet promise of renewal. That day, Central Park wasn't just a park. It was the setting of something new, intimate, deeply symbolic. Nathan adjusted his tie with slightly trembling fingers. Claire, just a few steps away, smiled as she held Hope in her arms, now nearly 1 year old, dressed in a delicate white dress with tiny hand-stitched flowers. It was a simple ceremony, with only a few guests. No over-the-top luxuries, no media, just the people who truly mattered. That was their choice. After everything they'd lived through, the lies, the fear, the twists and turns, they both knew that true love didn't need applause. It just needed to be real. Claire walked toward Nathan with slow, steady steps. Her dress flowed gently, and her hair was pulled back simply, revealing the face of a woman who had survived the streets, judgment, and her own guilt. And now, standing before the man who had seen her when no one else did, she was whole. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper. Nathan smiled, eyes glistening. More than ever. There were no judges, no rigid protocols, just a kind celebrant chosen by Claire and a small circle of close friends. Among them, familiar faces from the past. The elderly neighbor who had cared for Hope during those early Brooklyn days, a co-worker from the cafe, and even one of the doctors who had helped deliver Hope. Samantha wasn't there. She was still in a social rehabilitation program, but she had sent a letter asking for forgiveness. Claire hadn't read it yet. She kept it safe, said she'd read it when she was ready. The vows were simple but honest and full of truth. Nathan looked into Claire's eyes and said, "You taught me that love doesn't grow out of perfection, but from what's real. That forgiveness is stronger than pride, and that building a family means choosing every day to stay." Claire, voice trembling, replied, "You saw me when I felt invisible, gave me shelter when all I knew was the cold, and you never asked me to be perfect, just present. Today, I choose to be your home and let you be mine." When the celebrant pronounced them united, there was no loud applause, just silence, a reverent, peaceful silence. Hope clapped her tiny hands from Claire's lap, and everyone laughed. After the ceremony, they headed to a small reception in the garden of their home, now truly a home. It was no longer just Nathan's mansion. It was the place where Hope would take her first steps, where Claire would write her new chapters, where love, so battered and bruised, would begin to bloom again. Later, sitting on the porch steps, Nathan watched Claire play with Hope on the lawn. The wind rustled through the trees, and their daughter's laughter felt like a soundtrack to a life he never imagined he'd get to live. Claire came over and sat beside him. "You know," she said, gazing up at the amber-colored sky, "sometimes I still wonder if all this is real. It is as real as the ring on your finger, as real as that little girl who keeps tugging on my hair every morning." She laughed and rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think I had to hide to be loved, to shrink myself, to pretend to be someone else. But you loved me exactly as I was, and that's why I stayed." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, "And I only learned how to be a whole man when I stopped running from pain, when I realized that building an empire means nothing if you have no one to come home to." Night fell gently, and under the soft light of the garden lanterns, Hope slept in a hammock strung between two trees. Claire and Nathan watched her with a mix of awe and quiet gratitude. They had survived the worst: doubt, betrayal, lies, greed. And now they had the best: a new beginning, a life rebuilt on truth, conscious choices, and above all, love. But deep in Claire's heart, something stirred, a quiet longing to give back, to honor everything she had lived and learned. And as she watched Hope sleeping peacefully, she knew the next story would be hers to tell. Life doesn't always offer second chances, and when it does, they often come disguised as chaos. Claire never imagined that a simple question, "Do you have anything left over?" would change everything. She didn't ask for a home. She didn't ask for love. She didn't ask for justice. But somehow she received it all and more. She was tested. She was challenged. She faced pain that almost shattered her from the inside out. And she had to make choices that demanded courage, even when her heart felt broken. Nathan, behind all the wealth and success, was lost too. And it was by reaching out to someone who seemed to have nothing that he discovered what he himself had truly lost: meaning, belonging, love, hope. Claire's daughter wasn't just a baby. She was a symbol of life, a life that insists on blooming, even in the darkest conditions. She was hope. She was a new beginning. And even Samantha, with all her wrongs, carried an old wound, a void she tried to fill by controlling the lives of others. Because the truth is, we're all trying to find our way back home, one way or another. This story isn't just about Claire. It's about me. It's about you. It's about everyone who's ever felt rejected, who's ever feared they weren't enough, who's carried guilt, scars, or secrets. But it's also about what happens when we choose to forgive, when we choose to love even after being hurt, when we choose to move forward even when we're scared. Maybe you're also waiting for a chance, a helping hand, an honest gaze, an open door. Maybe you've already lost everything, but as long as there's love, as long as there's someone willing to believe in you, there is still a way forward. And if this story touched you in any way, if it moved you, if you saw yourself in it, if it made you feel seen or less alone, don't leave in silence. Subscribe to the channel right now, leave a comment, and tell us what resonated with you the most. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that life is still worth fighting for, because here, every story is more than just a story. It's a reunion with what makes us human.